Blood on virgin snow. That's what Elias Ward saw first crimson drops leading deeper into the frozen pines of New Mexico Territory, 1878. He thought he was tracking wounded game. Instead, he found a half-dead Apache woman chained in ice water beaten within an inch of her life. 3 years of isolation had taught him one thing: stay uninvolved, stay alive. But when her eyes opened fierce, unbroken, defiant, everything changed. This is their story. Watch until the end and comment your city so I can see how far this tale travels. The wind had teeth that morning. Elias Ward felt them bite through his buffalo coat as he stood on the ridge above his cabin, Winchester rifle cold against his gloved palm. Below, smoke curled from his chimney, the only warmth for 30 miles in any direction. January in the New Mexico high country didn't forgive weakness, and Elias had learned not to expect mercy from this land. It had taken everything from him already. 3 years. 3 years since cholera swept through Fort Stanton and claimed his wife Margaret and their daughter Sarah in the same blood-soaked week. 3 years since he'd turned in his cavalry scout badge, walked away from the blue uniform, and climbed into these mountains to die slowly instead of quickly. The isolation suited him. The silence was better than the screaming memories. He was about to turn back when he saw it. Red on white. A splash of crimson against the snow 20 yards down the slope near the creek bed. Elias's breath misted in the air as he studied the mark. Blood. Fresh enough that it hadn't frozen completely. His pulse quickened despite himself. The hunter's instinct never fully died, even when the man wanted to. He'd been surviving on salt pork and hardtack for 2 weeks. Fresh meat would see him through to spring. He checked the Winchester's load and started down the slope, boots crunching through the crusted snow. The blood trail led east, following the creek into a stand of ponderosa pines where the shadows lay thick and blue. Deer, probably. Maybe an elk, if he was lucky. Something had been wounded, and in this cold it wouldn't get far. But the tracks were wrong. Elias knelt, brushing snow away from an impression in the frozen mud. Not hooves. Not paws. He felt ice crystallize in his gut. The print was small, narrow, a moccasin badly worn. Human. Jesus Christ, he whispered. The blood trail intensified. Drops became smears. Smears became drag marks. Someone had crawled this way, bleeding heavily. Elias rose, scanning the tree line with the rifle raised. Apaches, bandits. The territory was a powder keg of violence, Geronimo's raids, Mexican slavers, white settlers pushing into sacred lands. Everyone had enemies. Everyone had reasons to hurt or be hurt. He should turn back. Whatever waited ahead wasn't his problem. He'd spent 3 years learning not to care, not to involve himself in the territory's endless cycle of revenge and counter-revenge. That path led only to more graves. But his feet kept moving. The creek narrowed into a ravine where ice had formed in thick sheets over the water. The blood trail led directly to the edge, then disappeared. Elias approached carefully, rifle-steady eyes scanning for ambush. The morning sun hadn't reached this deep into the gulch yet. Everything was shadow and freezing mist rising from the water. That's when he saw her. At first he thought it was a bundle of rags caught in the ice. Then the bundle moved, a weak, convulsive shudder that sent ripples through the shallow water. Elias's breath caught. A woman. An Apache woman, judging by the remnants of her deerskin dress and the way her long black hair spread across the ice like spilled ink. She was partially submerged in the creek, her upper body slumped against a rock. Her wrists were bound together with hemp rope, the kind white men used. The rope was tied to a heavy stone that had been thrown into deeper water, keeping her anchored in place. Someone had left her here to freeze to death. Elias stood paralyzed on the bank. His mind raced through calculations. Apache. Enemy. Her people had killed settlers, burned homesteads, taken scalps. The cavalry had retaliated by slaughtering camps, women, children, elders. The cycle was endless. She was part of that cycle. But she was also dying. Her lips were blue. Her skin, where it showed through torn fabric, was mottled purple and white with cold. Ice crystals had formed in her hair. She wasn't moving anymore except for shallow hitching breaths that barely disturbed the mist. Not your problem, Elias said aloud. His voice sounded strange in the empty ravine. Not your fight. He could walk away, should walk away. Return to his cabin, his solitude, his slow fade into irrelevance. Whatever had happened to this woman? Whoever had bound her and left her to die, it was part of a war he'd quit. He'd signed out of that war with his wife's blood still under his fingernails, with his daughter's last cough still echoing in his ears. He turned to leave. The woman's eyes opened. It happened so suddenly that Elias actually flinched, bringing the rifle up. But she didn't attack, didn't even move. She just looked at him, a direct, unflinching stare that cut through the cold like a blade. Her eyes were dark, almost black, and completely clear despite her condition. No pleading in them. No begging. Just recognition. She saw him, and she knew exactly what he was, a white man with a gun standing between her and death. She knew he would leave her. Elias held that gaze for 5 seconds, that felt like 5 years. In her eyes he saw something he recognized, the same thing he saw every time he caught his reflection in the cabin's cracked mirror. The look of someone who had lost everything and was simply waiting for the end to catch up. "God damn it," he breathed. He set the rifle down and descended the bank, his boots breaking through ice as he waded into the creek. The cold hit him like a fist, driving the air from his lungs. The water was only thigh-deep, but felt like it was made of broken glass. He reached the woman and grabbed her under the arms, trying to lift her. The rope snapped taut, holding her down. "Hold on," Elias muttered, though he doubted she understood English. He pulled his hunting knife and sawed at the hemp binding her wrists. The rope was swollen with ice water, stubborn. His fingers were already going numb. Come on, come on." The rope parted. The woman collapsed forward into his arms, dead weight. He caught her staggered, nearly fell. She weighed almost nothing. Starvation and exposure had carved her down to bone and will. He could feel her heart beating against his chest, rapid and weak, like a trapped bird. Elias hauled her out of the water and up the bank, his legs burning with cold and effort. At the top, he laid her on dry ground and assessed the damage. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. Her extremities were ice cold. The dress she wore was shredded in places, not from wear, but from violence. He could see bruises on her ribs, her face, her arms. Old bruises turning yellow and green alongside fresh purple ones. Someone had beaten her repeatedly over days, maybe weeks, before dumping her in that creek. Rage kindled in Elias's chest, a feeling he thought he'd frozen out of himself. This wasn't war. This was cruelty. This was what men did when they stopped seeing human beings and started seeing animals, objects, problems to be disposed of. He knew that mindset. He'd worn it himself back in the cavalry. He'd watched good men become monsters, justifying atrocities with words like savage and hostile. He'd participated. Not the worst of it, he'd drawn lines, refused certain orders, but he'd participated enough. That guilt was part of why he'd run to these mountains. "Not today," Elias said quietly. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around the woman. "Not like this." She didn't respond. Her eyes had closed again. He pressed his fingers to her throat, feeling for a pulse. It was there, fluttering but persistent. She was still fighting somewhere deep inside. Elias retrieved his rifle and hoisted the woman into his arms. She felt like carrying a skeleton wrapped in wet leather. He started back toward his cabin, moving as quickly as he could through the snow. Each step was a negotiation. She was light, but he was exhausted, and the cold was making his muscles sluggish. The climb back up to the ridge took 20 minutes that felt like hours. By the time he kicked open his cabin door, his arms were shaking with fatigue. Inside, the fire had burned down to coals. He laid the woman on his bed, the only bed, and immediately began building up the flames. The cabin was small, crude. One room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, 2 chairs, and the bed Margaret had insisted they bring from Fort Stanton. "Even on the frontier, Elias, we don't sleep on the ground like animals, she'd said. The memory stabbed him, but he pushed it aside. Ghosts could wait. The living couldn't. He stripped the wet dress off the woman, no time for modesty, not with hypothermia setting in, and wrapped her in every blanket and fur he owned. Her skin was like ice mottled with cold. He pressed his ear to her chest. Her heartbeat was rapid and irregular. Her breathing was shallow. Elias had seen hypothermia before, men caught in blizzards during cavalry patrols. The ones who survived were the ones who got warm fast. He added more wood to the fire until the room was sweltering, then heated water, and began the slow process of warming her extremities with cloth compresses. She didn't wake, didn't move except to shiver violently when the warmth reached her core. "Come on," Elias urged, rubbing her hands between his palms. "Don't quit now. You survived that creek. You can survive this." No response. He worked through the morning and into the afternoon, changing compresses, checking her pulse, dripping warm broth between her lips when he could get her to swallow. The bruises on her body told their own story, systematic beatings carefully placed to hurt but not kill quickly. Her wrists bore scars from older rope burns, suggesting this wasn't the first time she'd been bound. One of her fingers had been broken and healed crooked. Burns on her arms looked like cigar marks. Torture. Prolonged, deliberate torture. "Who did this to you?" Elias asked the unconscious woman. "Why?" The fire crackled. Wind howled outside. No answers came. As darkness fell, Elias finally collapsed into one of the chairs, too exhausted to do more. He'd done everything he could think of. Now it was up to her body, her will. He watched her breathe in and out, each breath a small victory. He must have dozed because when he jerked awake, the fire had burned low again, and the cabin was dim. He immediately looked to the bed. The woman's eyes were open. She stared at him across the shadowy room, her expression unreadable. Not grateful, not fearful, just assessing. Taking his measure the way a wolf measures a potential threat. Elias slowly raised his hands, palms out. "You're safe," he said quietly. "No one's going to hurt you here." She didn't respond, probably didn't understand. He gestured to himself. "Elias. My name is Elias Ward." Then he pointed to her, raising his eyebrows in question. Her jaw tightened. She looked away, staring at the ceiling instead. "All right," Elias said. "You don't have to tell me anything, but you're hurt and you need rest. Just stay there. I won't touch you unless you need help." He stood slowly, moving to add wood to the fire. When he turned back, she was watching him again, tracking his every movement like prey watches a predator. The mistrust in her eyes was absolute. He understood. He was wearing the same type of clothes as the men who'd hurt her. He was the enemy. But he'd also pulled her from that creek. The contradiction would take time to resolve. Elias settled back into his chair, pulling a blanket around his shoulders. "I'll sleep here tonight," he said, more to fill the silence than because he expected her to understand. "You take the bed. You need it more than I do." She kept staring at him until exhaustion pulled her back under. Her eyes closed, her breathing evened out. Elias waited until he was sure she was asleep before letting himself relax. Outside, the wind howled through the pines. Inside, two enemies shared warmth and wondered what morning would bring. 3 days later. The woman didn't speak, didn't tell him her name, barely acknowledged his existence except to watch him with those dark, calculating eyes whenever he moved around the cabin. But she was healing. Elias could see it in the way her breathing steadied, how the dangerous pallor left her skin. The fever that spiked the second night broke by dawn on the third day. She started accepting food, small amounts at first, just broth and soft bread, then more solid fare as her stomach adjusted. He learned her routines quickly. She wouldn't eat until he'd tasted the food first, proving it wasn't poisoned. She wouldn't sleep deeply until he was clearly asleep himself, snoring in his chair by the fire. She watched the door, constantly marking exits, calculating distances. She was planning escape. Elias couldn't blame her. From her perspective, she'd been captured by enemies, tortured, left to die, then captured again by a different enemy. The fact that he'd saved her life didn't erase the uniform he used to wear, the people he used to hunt. On the fourth morning, he woke to find her sitting up in bed, testing her legs. The bruises were fading to yellow. The cuts were scabbing over. She was still weak. He could see her arms trembling from the effort of holding her weight, but she was determined. "You're not ready," Elias said from his chair. She froze, eyes snapping to him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then she swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood. Her knees buckled immediately. She would have hit the floor if Elias hadn't crossed the room in 3 strides and caught her. She tensed in his grip, and he felt her hand go to his belt, looking for the knife he usually kept there. He'd started leaving it on the table at night. Smart woman. "Easy," he said, supporting her weight. "You've been through hell. Your body needs time." She pulled away from him with more strength than he expected, staggering back against the bed. Her eyes were wild now, cornered, animal, desperate. She said something in Apache, harsh and guttural, clearly a warning or curse. Elias stepped back, hands raised. I know you want to leave, but there's 3 feet of snow outside, you don't have proper clothes, and the nearest settlement is 2 days' walk through mountain passes. You'll die out there. She said something else in Apache. He caught one word he recognized, Shizinde, the people. That's what the Apaches called themselves. Your people, Elias said, nodding. You want to get back to your people. I understand, but you need to be stronger first. He moved to the trunk in the corner and pulled out an old shirt and pants. Margaret's riding clothes kept out of sentiment he couldn't quite name. They'd be too big on the woman, but better than nothing. Here, he said, laying them on the bed. Get dressed if you want. I'll step outside, give you privacy. He grabbed his coat and rifle and did exactly that, closing the door behind him. The morning was bright and cold sunlight glittering off fresh snow. He stood on the porch, breathing steam, giving her time. 10 minutes later, he heard something crash inside, probably the water pitcher. He gave it another 5 minutes, then knocked on his own door. I'm coming in, he announced, then entered. The woman was dressed in Margaret's clothes, the shirt hanging off her thin frame, the pants belted tight with rope. She'd found his map, the old cavalry survey map he kept in the trunk, and had it spread on the table. Her finger traced the canyon systems to the south, Mescalero territory. She was trying to figure out how to get home. Elias approached slowly, hands visible. He pointed to a spot on the map. We're here. These mountains. Then he traced a route south. Your people, Shizinde? Probably here. Maybe 70, 80 miles. She looked at him sharply. He could see her mind working, calculating whether this was truth or trap. He pointed to the date on the calendar he kept scratched into the wall. January, deep winter. The passes are snowed in. He gestured to show depth. Dangerous, even for someone healthy. She stared at the map, then at him. When she spoke, her voice was rough from disuse, thick with accent, but the English was clear enough. Why? Help. The question landed like a stone in still water. Elias pulled out a chair and sat suddenly exhausted. Why had he helped? He'd been asking himself the same thing for 4 days. A dozen answers presented themselves, none quite complete. Because she was dying, because someone had to. Because he'd seen too much death and couldn't stomach more. Because in her eyes, he'd seen his own grief reflected back. I don't know, he said finally. I quit the cavalry 3 years ago after my wife and daughter died. I came up here to be alone. I'm not supposed to care anymore. She watched him unblinking. But I found you in that creek, he continued, and I guess I still had one piece of humanity left. He looked at her directly. Whoever left you there wanted you to suffer. I couldn't let that happen. Silence stretched between them. The fire popped and settled. Name, she asked, pointing to herself. Your name, Elias asked. She nodded. He waited. She seemed to struggle with the decision, then Taya. Taya. He repeated carefully, pronouncing it the way she had. Ta-ya. I'm Elias. Elias, she echoed. Something shifted in her expression, not trust, not yet, but acknowledgement. He was no longer just enemy. He was becoming person. It was a start. Over the following days, they developed a fragile routine. Elias taught her essential English words: food, water, fire, danger, safe. She taught him a few Apache words in return, though she seemed reluctant to share much of her language. They communicated in a broken hybrid of gestures, simple words, and careful observation. He learned she was strong-willed, proud, intelligent. She learned he was solitary, haunted, but fundamentally decent. The mistrust remained, but it began to coexist with something else, a tentative recognition of shared humanity. One evening, 10 days after he'd found her, Elias was preparing dinner when Taya spoke from the bed, where she was mending one of his torn shirts. She'd insisted on working, repaying his help with labor. They take me, she said haltingly. Mexican. Traitors. They take me when I search for my son. Elias's hands stilled on the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables. He turned to look at her. She wasn't meeting his eyes, focused intently on her stitching. Your son, he asked carefully. Cohen. The name came out soft, aching. 4 summers old. Our camp, attacked. I look for him in smoke and blood. Men find me, chain me. Her hands clenched on the shirt. Trade me, hit me, use me. The knife trembled in Elias's grip. He set it down before he did something stupid like put it through the table. The men who left you in the creek, he asked. They say I am animal, worthless. Her voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of someone reciting facts they'd had to accept. They tire of me, decide to watch me die slow, make bets how long I last. White-hot rage flooded through Elias's veins. He'd seen that kind of cruelty before. Men who started seeing other humans as objects, as entertainment. It was a disease that infected the frontier, spreading through camps and settlements like cholera. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry I wore the same uniform as men who see your people that way. Taya finally looked up. You wear uniform. Past tense. Used to. I was a cavalry scout for 7 years. He gestured to the trunk where his old uniform lay folded at the bottom, untouched. I tracked Apache warriors, guided soldiers to camps. He met her eyes. I never killed women or children. I drew that line, but I helped others do it. He expected hatred, disgust. Instead, Taya studied him for a long moment, then returned to her sewing. You quit, she said. Not all quit. No, Elias agreed quietly. Not all quit. Maybe not enough quit. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the crackle of fire and the whisper of thread through cloth. Your wife and daughter, Taya said eventually. How they die. Elias closed his eyes. He hadn't spoken their names aloud in 2 years. Cholera. It swept through Fort Stanton in '75, killed 60 people in 3 weeks. Margaret and Sarah, his voice cracked. He cleared his throat. They died within 2 days of each other. Sarah was 5 years old. Same age my Cohen, Taya said softly. Yeah. Elias opened his eyes, staring into the fire. I buried them in the fort cemetery. I stayed for a few more months, but everything reminded me of them. Every building, every path, every sunrise. So I left. Came up here where there were no memories. Does it work? Taya asked. The forgetting. Elias laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. No. The memories follow. They're quieter here, but they follow. Yes, Taya agreed. They follow. Understanding passed between them, the recognition of shared loss, shared grief. They were both haunted, both running from ghosts they couldn't outpace. Taya set aside her sewing and stood moving to the window. She looked out at the moonlit snow, her reflection ghostly in the glass. I must find Cohen, she said. He is alive. I know. A mother knows. Where would he be? Elias asked. With Shiz Inde. My sister, she would take him. They hide in canyons south. She touched the cold glass. I must go to them. The passes will start clearing in 6 weeks, Elias said. Late February, early March. I could guide you. Help you get there. She turned to look at him, surprise evident on her face. Why help more? Elias shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable. Because you deserve to see your son again. Because if my Sarah was out there somewhere, I'd want someone to help me find her. He paused. And because it's the right thing to do. Taya stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. When snow melts, we go. When the snow melts, Elias agreed. Outside, the January wind howled through the pines, carrying secrets and sorrows through the frozen night. Inside the cabin, 2 broken people, enemies by birth, allies by choice, stood together by the fire, warming themselves against the cold. Neither knew that in 6 weeks' time they would face blood and bullets, betrayal and death. Neither knew that the journey to find her son would become a journey to find themselves. Neither knew that somewhere in the darkness men with cruel intentions were already hunting. But for now, in this moment, there was warmth. There was food. There was the fragile beginning of trust. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. The weeks that followed moved like a slow thaw, ice melting drop by drop, revealing what had been frozen beneath. February arrived with bitter winds that rattled the cabin walls, but inside something warmer than fire had begun to grow. Elias woke each morning to find Taya already awake, standing by the window watching the mountains. She never said what she was looking for, but he knew. She was measuring the snow depth, calculating when the passes would clear, counting the days until she could search for her son. That longing was a living thing between them, palpable as smoke. "Tell me about Cohen," Elias said one morning as they shared breakfast cornmeal mush sweetened with the last of his honey. "What's he like?" Taya's expression softened in a way it rarely did. "Strong. Very strong for small boy. He climbs everything trees, rocks my back when I cook." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "He laughs like thunder, loud, big. Makes everyone laugh with him." "Sounds like he takes after his mother," Elias observed. "Stubborn, strong." "His father, too," Taya said, and something shadowed her face. "Nashoda. Good man. Good warrior. He died 2 winters past, cavalry ambush near Mexican border." Elias set down his spoon, appetite gone. "I'm sorry." "You say sorry many times," Taya said, not unkindly. "You not kill him. Different soldiers kill him. Different war, different day." "Same uniform," Elias countered. "Same flag. I can be sorry for what my people did, even if I didn't pull the trigger." She studied him across the table, and he felt the weight of her assessment. "You are strange white man Elias Ward. You have grief that makes you soft inside. Most white men, grief makes them hard, mean. They want others to hurt like they hurt. I've met those men," Elias said quietly. "Fought alongside them. Some of them were my friends." He pushed his bowl away. "War does things to people. Makes them think suffering is currency. You hurt me, I hurt you, round and round until everyone's bleeding. Shizinde know this," Taya said. "We fight Mexicans for 100 years. We fight Americans for 50 years. We fight other tribes forever. Always blood. Always revenge." She looked at her hands scarred and calloused. "I am tired of blood." "Me too," Elias admitted. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind. These moments had become frequent shared understanding passing between them without need for words. Language was still a barrier, but grief was universal. So was exhaustion with violence. "English is getting better," Elias said, changing the subject to safer ground. "You learn fast." "I must," Taya replied. "If I go home, I need to speak to white soldiers, traitors. Need to protect my people with words, not just weapons." She pronounced each word carefully, precisely. "Mexican traitors, they teach me some English. With beatings, with—" She trailed off, jaw tightening. "You don't have to talk about it," Elias said quickly. "I know." She met his eyes. "But I choose to talk. If I hide what they did, they win. They make me ashamed. I am not ashamed. They should be ashamed." The fierceness in her voice struck something deep in Elias's chest. This woman had been brutalized, left to die, and yet she refused to be diminished by it. She carried her trauma like a scar, acknowledging it, but not letting it define her. "You're right," he said. "They should be ashamed, and if I ever meet the men who hurt you, they'll answer for it." Taya tilted her head, considering him. "You would fight for Apache woman, risk your life." "I'd fight for any person who was wronged that way," Elias said. Then more honestly, "But yes, I'd fight for you." Something shifted in her expression, surprise maybe, or the beginning of trust, solidifying into something more certain. She nodded slowly, then returned to her breakfast. That afternoon, Elias decided it was time to teach Taya to shoot. If they were going to travel through hostile territory in 6 weeks, she needed to defend herself. He'd been putting it off, uncertain how she'd react to being armed by a former enemy, but her comment about protecting her people had decided him. "Come outside," he said, pulling his spare revolver from the trunk, a Colt Navy he'd carried as backup during his cavalry days. "I'm going to teach you something." Taya followed him onto the porch, curiosity bright in her eyes. When he held out the revolver, she took it carefully, testing its weight. "You know guns?" Elias asked. "Some," Rifle, I know. Pistol, not much. She turned it over in her hands, examining the mechanism. Heavy. It's loaded, so be careful where you point it, Elias cautioned. He guided her hands into proper position, standing behind her to adjust her grip. She tensed at his proximity but didn't pull away. See that pine tree down there? The one with the broken branch? That's your target. He stepped back, giving her space. Taya raised the revolver arms extended and fired. The shot went wide by 3 feet, kicking up snow to the left of the tree. She frowned, frustrated. First one's always rough, Elias said. Try again. Focus on the sight at the end of the barrel. Breathe out slow, squeeze the trigger gentle. She adjusted, aimed, fired. Closer this time, hit the tree trunk, but low. Better. Keep trying. For the next hour, they worked through the fundamentals. By the time the revolver was empty, Taya was consistently hitting her target. She had steady hands and fierce concentration. With practice, she'd be formidable. Good, Elias said, taking the gun to reload. Real good. Natural shooter. Apache women no weapons, Taya said matter-of-factly. We defend camps when men hunt. We teach children. We fight when we must. She looked at him seriously. My grandmother, she kills 6 Mexican soldiers who attack our village. With knife and rifle. She was 53 summers old. Elias whistled low. Remind me never to cross Apache grandmothers. That earned him something rare, a genuine laugh from Taya. It transformed her face, made her look younger, less burdened. The sound echoed across the snow and vanished into the pines. They were walking back to the cabin when she suddenly froze, hand shooting out to grip his arm. Listen. Elias went still, straining his ears. At first he heard only wind, then hoofbeats, multiple horses coming up the eastern trail. Inside, he said quietly. Now. They moved quickly, but without panic, entering the cabin and barring the door. Elias went to the window, peering through the gap in the shutters. Taya stood behind him, the spare revolver he'd just taught her to use now gripped in her hand. 4 riders emerged from the tree line, rough-looking men on rougher-looking horses. They wore a mix of Confederate gray and civilian clothes, all of it stained and patched. 2 carried rifles across their saddles. 1 had a bandolier of ammunition across his chest. The 4th, riding slightly ahead, wore a battered cavalry officer's hat and a long buffalo coat. Elias's blood went cold. Jesus, he breathed. I know him. The one in front. That's Cyrus Daggert. Who? Taya asked, voice low and tense. My former commander. Captain Well, he was a captain. Got discharged after the war for... Elias swallowed. For things he did to prisoners, Apache prisoners. Taya's grip tightened on the revolver. Bad man. Worse than bad, Elias said grimly. He's evil, pure evil. The rider stopped 50 yards from the cabin. Daggert stood in his stirrups, surveying the property with casual arrogance. Ward, he called out, voice carrying clear across the snow. Elias Ward, I know you're in there. Come on out and let's have a talk. Elias considered ignoring him, but Daggert wasn't the type to leave without answers. He checked his Winchester, made sure it was loaded, then turned to Taya. Stay inside, Dit, he said. Don't show yourself. If shooting starts, get under the bed and stay there. I can fight, Taya protested. I know you can, but I need you alive to find your son. He caught her eyes. Please, trust me on this. She hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Be careful, Elias. He stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually across his chest, not threatening but ready. The morning sun was bright in his eyes, making the riders into dark silhouettes against white snow. Daggert, Elias called back. Didn't expect to see you up in these mountains. Thought you'd moved on to easier prey down in the territories. Daggert laughed, a sound like rocks grinding. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders, with a face that might have been handsome before hard living, and harder drinking carved it into something brutal. A scar ran from his left eye to his jaw, courtesy of an Apache knife, Elias remembered. Still got that smart mouth, Ward. Good to see 3 years of hermit living hasn't softened you completely. Daggert walked his horse forward a few paces. His men stayed back but spread out slightly tactical positioning. Mind if we water our horses? It's been a long ride. State your business first, Elias said. Then we'll talk about hospitality. Fair enough. Daggert leaned forward in his saddle, grinning. We're hunting, tracking an escaped Apache woman. Valuable property that some Mexican traders lost. They're offering $200 for her return, alive preferably, but they'll take a body. Elias kept his face neutral. That's a lot of money for one woman. She killed 3 men when she escaped, Daggert said. Slit their throats in the night, stole a horse. Real wildcat, from what I hear. He gestured vaguely south. We tracked her this way about 2 weeks back. Trail went cold near your property line. Haven't seen any Apache women, Elias said. Which was technically true. He'd seen one Apache woman, just one. Daggert's eyes narrowed. That's strange, Ward. Because we followed a blood trail to a creek about 3 miles from here. Found rope fresh cut. Someone pulled her out of that water. He smiled, showing yellowed teeth. And you're the only white man living within 30 miles. Silence stretched between them. The wind picked up swirling snow around the horse's legs. Elias calculated odds. 4 against 1 were bad odds. 4 against 2 if Taya could shoot as well under pressure as she had at practice were slightly better but still bad. Maybe she pulled herself out, Elias suggested. Apache are tough. Maybe, Daggert agreed. Or maybe a soft-hearted ex-scout found her and brought her home like a stray dog. He cocked his head. You always did have peculiar ideas about Indians, Ward. Thought they were people treated them with respect. It was your biggest weakness. I thought it was called basic humanity, Elias said coldly. Humanity. Daggert spat in the snow. Humanity is for humans. Apache are animals with the faces of humans. The sooner people understand that, the sooner we can finish what needs finishing. Rage burned in Elias's gut, but he kept it off his face. Like I said, I haven't seen anyone. You and your boys should move on. Oh, we will, Daggert said pleasantly. But first I think we'll search your cabin. Make sure you're being truthful. You won't mind, will you, old friends helping each other out? I mind, Elias said, bringing the rifle up slightly. Not aimed, not yet, but the message was clear. You're not welcome here, Daggert. Take your men and leave. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Daggert's smile vanished, replaced by cold calculation. Behind him, the 3 riders shifted hands, moving toward weapons. That's disappointing, Ward, Daggert said softly. Real disappointing. Makes me think you've got something to hide. What I've got is a desire to be left alone, Elias replied. Same desire that brought me up to these mountains in the first place. Now leave my property. For a long moment, no one moved. The standoff hung in the balance, waiting for someone to tip it toward violence. Then Daggert laughed and pulled his horse back. All right, Ward, we'll go. But I'll be watching. If that Apache woman shows her face anywhere between here and the border, I'll know about it. He turned his horse. And if I find out you've been harboring her aiding an escaped prisoner, well, that makes you an accomplice. And accomplices don't fare well in my book. Good thing I don't give a damn about your book, Elias said. Daggert's eyes went flat and dangerous. Watch yourself, Ward. These mountains are big, but they're not big enough to hide forever. We'll be back this way. Count on it. He kicked his horse into motion, his 3 men following. They rode east back the way they'd come, but Elias noticed one of them kept looking back, memorizing the cabin's location. Elias stayed on the porch until they disappeared into the tree line, then waited another 10 minutes to make sure they were really gone. Only then did he lower the rifle and step back inside. Taya was exactly where he told her not to be, standing beside the window with the revolver watching the riders leave. She turned as he entered. They hunt me, she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, $200. She looked at her hands. That is much money for white men. It's enough, Elias admitted. Enough to make men like Daggert very motivated. You should give me to them, Taya said quietly. Take money. Live good. Elias stared at her. Are you serious? $200 is nothing, Elias interrupted sharply. Nothing compared to a human life. Taya, I don't know what kind of men you've dealt with, but I'm not selling you. Not for 200, not for 2,000, not ever. She looked at him for a long time, something complex moving behind her eyes. Why, you do not know me. My people killed your people. Your people killed my people. Why you risk so much? Elias set the rifle down and faced her fully. Because 3 years ago, I stood over my daughter's grave and promised myself that if I survived, if I kept living, it would mean something. It would count for something. His voice roughened. I can't bring Sarah back. I can't undo the things I did in the cavalry, but I can help one person who deserves help. I can stand between you and men like Daggert. That counts. That means something. Tears shone in Taya's eyes, the first he'd seen from her. She blinked them back fiercely, but not before he saw. My people have word, she said. Shichu. It means person who stands with you in dark times, person who shares burden. She met his gaze. You are Shichu Li as ward. I'm just trying to do the right thing, Elias said. That is what Shichu means, Taya replied. They stood there in the cabin's warm light, two people from opposite sides of a brutal conflict, connected now by something stronger than tribal allegiance or national identity. Connected by shared humanity, by the simple choice to care in a world that often made caring dangerous. We need to leave sooner than planned, Elias said, breaking the moment. If Daggert's watching, we can't wait until March. We need to move while the passes are still difficult. They'll expect us to wait for easier travel. How soon? Taya asked. Week, maybe less. He moved to the trunk, started pulling out supplies, rope, ammunition, dried food. I'll need to make a run into town, get provisions. You'll stay here, keep the doors barred. No, Taya said firmly. I go with you. Too dangerous. If someone sees you, if you go alone and men follow you back, I am trapped. She crossed her arms. I go, I hide in wagon under blankets. But I go. Elias wanted to argue, but her logic was sound. Splitting up was dangerous in different ways. At least together they could watch each other's backs. All right, he conceded. But you do exactly as I say. If I tell you to hide, you hide. If I tell you to run, you run. Agreed what? Agreed what? Taya said. Then softer, Shichu. 2 days later, they made the journey to Willow Creek, the nearest town. It was barely a town, more a collection of buildings huddled around a general store and saloon serving miners and trappers passing through. Elias pulled the wagon to a stop behind the general store near the loading dock where fewer people would see. Stay here, he told Taya, who was buried under blankets and furs in the wagon bed. Don't come out for any reason. I understand, came her muffled reply. Elias entered the store, squinting in the dim interior. Jacob Mueller, the proprietor, looked up from his ledger and smiled. Ward, haven't seen you in months. Thought maybe the winter had claimed you. Takes more than snow to kill me, Jacob, Elias said, pulling out his list. Need supplies. Flour, salt, dried beef ammunition for Winchester and Colt. Coffee, if you've got it. Jacob started pulling items from shelves. Big order. You planning a trip? Thinking about checking my old trap lines, Elias lied smoothly. See if there's any fur worth taking. Jacob packaged goods in brown paper. Had some men through here yesterday asking questions, rough-looking types, led by a big fellow with a scar. Elias's hand stilled on the counter. What kind of questions? About Apache, specifically about an Apache woman. Jacob's eyes flicked up shrewd. Said she was dangerous, killed 3 men, offering a reward. That's so, Elias said carefully. That's so. Jacob wrapped the last package. They also asked if any local men had been making unusual purchases, buying women's clothes, extra food, things like that. Silence hung between them. Jacob was no fool. He'd lived on the frontier for 30 years, survived the Mexican War, the Apache Wars, the Civil War. He knew when something didn't add up. Jacob, Elias said quietly, you ever done something you weren't proud of? Something that kept you up at night? The older man's expression shifted. I've done my share. We all have out here. Then you understand that sometimes a man gets a chance to balance the scales. Do something right to make up for the things that went wrong. Elias met his eyes. I need these supplies. I need you to forget I was here. Can you do that? Jacob looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I can do that. But Ward, those men aren't playing. They're serious. Whatever you're planning, be careful. I will, Elias promised, paying twice what the supplies were worth. He loaded the goods into the wagon, working quickly. As he climbed onto the driver's seat, he heard voices from the front of the store raised aggressive. His blood chilled. Daggert. I'm telling you, someone in this town is helping her, Daggert's voice carried clearly. An Apache woman doesn't survive 2 weeks in these mountains alone. Someone's feeding her, sheltering her. Elias snapped the reins, urging the horses into motion. They pulled away from the loading dock just as Daggert and his men came around the corner of the building. For one frozen second, Elias locked eyes with his former commander. Recognition flared in Daggert's face, followed by cold certainty. There! Daggert shouted. Stop that wagon! Elias didn't stop. He snapped the reins harder, pushing the horses into a run. Behind him, he heard Taya shifting under the blankets. Stay down! He barked. Gunfire erupted. A bullet whined past Elias's ear, another thunked into the wagon's side. He hunched low, urging every ounce of speed from the horses. The wagon careened onto the main road out of town, wheels bouncing over frozen ruts. More shots. One of the horses screamed but kept running. They plunged into the forest trees, closing around them, branches whipping past. Elias risked a glance back Daggert, and his men were mounting up, preparing to give chase. Hold on! Elias shouted to Taya. He guided the wagon off the main trail onto a narrow hunting path he knew from his cavalry days, barely wide enough for the wagon, overgrown with brush. The horses balked, but he forced them forward. Behind, he could hear Daggert's men crashing through the undergrowth, cursing. The path twisted, climbed, dropped into a ravine. Elias pushed the horses mercilessly, knowing their lives depended on distance. Finally, after 20 minutes of brutal riding, he turned onto an even smaller path that led to an abandoned trapper's cabin he'd discovered years ago. He pulled the wagon behind the cabin into a stand of thick pines that concealed it from the trail. The horses stood heaving, foam flecking their mouths. One had a graze across its shoulder. The bullet wound wasn't deep, but it needed attention. Taya emerged from the blankets, revolver in hand, eyes fierce. They follow. Lost them in the ravine, Elias said, climbing down. But they'll figure out where we went eventually. We can't stay here long. He tended to the injured horse, washing the wound with precious whiskey and wrapping it. Taya kept watch, moving like a shadow around the cabin's perimeter. As darkness fell, they made a cold camp inside the abandoned structure. No fire, no light. They ate dried beef and hard bread in silence, listening to the forest sounds. I am sorry, Taya said finally. I bring danger to you. You didn't bring anything, Elias replied. The danger was already here. Men like Daggert, they're the danger. You're just trying to survive. Still, you lose your safe place because of me. My safe place was an illusion, Elias said. He looked at her in the darkness, seeing only the gleam of her eyes. I was hiding, not living. Maybe it's time I stopped hiding. What we do now? Taya asked. Elias pulled out his map, though he couldn't see it in the dark. He'd memorized it anyway. We can't go back to my cabin. They'll be watching. Can't go through Willow Creek. So we go around, take the high passes, even though they're still snowed in. It'll be dangerous, but less dangerous than Daggert. Dawn. We'll need the daylight to navigate. They sat in silence, both knowing dawn would bring hardship and danger. But it would also bring them closer to Taya's people, closer to her son. That goal burned brighter than any fear. Elias, Taya said softly, thank you for everything. You already thanked me, he replied. I thank you again, because you give me hope. First time in long time, I have hope. Elias felt something crack open in his chest, a warmth he'd thought frozen forever. You give me hope too, he admitted. Didn't realize how much I needed it until now. In the darkness, he felt her hand find his and squeeze once briefly. Then she withdrew, but the warmth of that gesture lingered. Outside, the wind howled through the pines. Somewhere behind them, Daggert and his men searched. Somewhere ahead, in the hidden canyons of the south, a little boy waited for his mother. And between here and there lay 70 miles of snow rock and violence. But they'd face it together. Shichu. People who stand together in dark times. As Elias drifted toward uneasy sleep, his last thought was that maybe, just maybe, he'd finally found a reason to stop running from his ghosts. Maybe saving Taya, helping her find her son, would be the thing that saved him too. Morning would tell. Dawn broke cold and merciless, painting the snow in shades of gray and blue. Elias woke with frost in his beard, and Taya already up standing at the cabin's broken window like a sentinel. She turned when she heard him stir. "No one came," she reported quietly. "I listen all night. Forest is quiet." "That doesn't mean they're not out there," Elias said, stretching stiff muscles. Every joint protested he wasn't as young as he used to be, and sleeping on frozen ground reminded him of that fact. "Daggert's patient when he wants to be. He'll have men watching the trails." They ate a hurried breakfast of hard bread and dried apple, then hitched the horses. The wounded one was favoring its leg but could still pull. It would have to be enough. Elias studied the map one more time in the growing light, tracing the route he'd decided on during the night. "We go up," he said, pointing to the mountains that rose like jagged teeth to the south. "Over Copper Ridge, down through Dead Man's Pass, then into the canyon country where your people hide. 3 days of hard travel? Maybe 4. Taya looked at the peaks, still heavy with snow. "Dangerous." "Everything's dangerous now," Elias replied. He met her eyes. "But up there, Daggert's men can't follow on horseback. They'll have to go around the long way. Gives us a week's lead, maybe more." "Then we go up," Taya said simply. They abandoned the wagon, too conspicuous, too slow for mountain travel. Elias loaded supplies onto the horses' backs, distributing weight carefully. He gave Taya the Colt revolver, and spare ammunition kept the Winchester for himself. They set out on foot, leading the horses as the sun climbed into a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The first day was brutal. The temperature never rose above freezing, and the snow in the high passes was waist-deep in places. They broke trail turn by turn, each taking an hour in front before dropping back to let the other lead. The horses struggled sometimes, sinking to their chests, snorting fear and exhaustion. By midday, Elias's legs were burning, his lungs aching from the thin air. Taya moved beside him with grim determination, never complaining, never slowing. Whatever the Mexican traders had done to her hadn't broken her spirit. If anything, she seemed forged harder by it, tempered like steel. "How much farther today?" she asked, during a brief rest, both of them breathing hard. "Maybe 3 more miles to the ridgeline," Elias said, consulting the landmarks. "There's a cave up there I used to use during cavalry patrols. We can shelter for the night." "Good." Taya scanned the tree line behind them. "I feel eyes watching." Elias felt it too, that prickle between the shoulder blades that meant danger nearby. He'd learned to trust that instinct during the war. Could be Daggert's men. Could be animals. Could be nothing. "Not nothing," Taya said with certainty. "Something follows." They pushed on, moving faster now despite their exhaustion. The sun was dropping toward the peaks when they finally reached the ridgeline. The cave was exactly where Elias remembered, a cleft in the granite barely visible unless you knew where to look deep enough to shelter them and the horses. Inside, out of the wind, the temperature felt almost warm by comparison. Elias risked a small fire using dry wood he'd stored in the cave years ago. They needed the warmth, and the smoke would disperse through cracks in the rock ceiling. "Eat," Elias said, passing Taya dried beef and the last of the bread. "Then sleep. I'll take first watch." "No," Taya said. "We share watch, 2 hours each." Elias wanted to argue, but the stubbornness in her eyes stopped him. 2 hours, he agreed. She smiled slightly, a rare expression that transformed her face. "You learn, white man. Apache women are not weak." "Never thought you were," Elias said honestly. They ate in silence, the fire crackling between them. Outside, the wind howled through the peaks, but inside the cave felt almost peaceful, almost safe. Elias found himself watching Taya in the firelight, the strong line of her jaw, the way her hair fell across her shoulders, the graceful economy of her movements. She was beautiful, he realized with a start. Not in the conventional way white society measured such things, but in the way wild things were beautiful, fierce, untamed, perfectly suited to their environment. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. "What? Nothing," Elias said, embarrassed. "Just thinking. About—" He hesitated, then decided honesty was better than awkwardness. "About how strong you are. After everything that happened to you, you're still fighting, still going forward. It's..." Impressive. Taya looked away into the fire. What choice do I have? Cohen needs me. If I give up, I fail him. I fail my husband's memory. I fail my people. She pulled her knees to her chest. Some days I want to give up, want to lie down in snow and let cold take me, but then I think of Cohen's laugh, his small hands, the way he says, Ima, mother, and I keep walking. He's lucky to have you for a mother, Elias said. I am lucky to have him for son, Taya replied. He gives me reason to survive. What was your husband like? Elias asked, then immediately regretted it. I'm sorry you don't have to. No is good to talk about him. Taya smiled, sad but genuine. Nashoda was kind, patient, good teacher. He teach Cohen to track rabbits, to read stars, to respect all living things. Her voice caught. He teach me to love again after my first husband died in Mexican raid. Nashoda said pain is not the end of story, pain is middle. We get to write the end. That's beautiful, Elias said softly. Yes. Taya wiped her eyes quickly. He write his end with bullet and chest protecting our camp. Cavalry came at dawn. He told me to run with Cohen. I ran. He stayed and fought. She looked at Elias. He bought us time with his life. I will not waste that gift. Elias felt the weight of that story settle over him. I'm sorry the cavalry took him from you. I'm sorry my people caused so much pain. Your people... Taya shook her head. You are not responsible for all white men, Elias, just like I am not responsible for all Apache. We are just us. Two people trying to do right thing. She met his eyes across the fire. That is enough. They sat in companionable silence until Taya's head began to droop. Elias insisted she sleep first. She didn't argue this time, simply wrapped herself in blankets and curled near the fire. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out. Elias sat with the Winchester across his knees, watching the cave entrance and the sleeping woman in turns. Outside night fell completely, bringing stars so bright they looked like holes punched in black cloth. The wind died down, leaving an eerie stillness. That's when he heard it. A sound like stone scraping stone, distant but distinct. Then another. Someone was climbing the ridge. Elias moved to the cave entrance, peering into the darkness. For several minutes he saw nothing. Then, there. Movement on the slope below, perhaps 200 yards down. Moonlight caught on metal. Guns. 3 men climbing toward the cave. Elias's mind raced. They couldn't have tracked them in the dark, which meant they'd been following all day, waiting for them to stop. Smart, patient, dangerous. He moved back to Taya and shook her shoulder gently. Her eyes opened instantly, alert. Company, he whispered. 3 men coming up the ridge. Taya was on her feet in seconds, revolver in hand. Daggert's men. Probably. They're trying to surround the cave. Elias thought quickly. We have one advantage. They don't know we know they're coming. We can ambush them. How? You take position on the right side of the entrance behind that rock outcropping. I'll take the left. When they come into the cave, we hit them from both sides. Crossfire. Taya nodded, moving immediately to her position. Elias doused the fire, plunging the cave into darkness. He took his own position, Winchester ready, and waited. The minutes stretched like hours. Elias could hear his own heartbeat loud in his ears. Beside him, he sensed Taya's presence, calm, coiled, ready. They'd become a unit, he realized. Partners. Trusting each other with their lives without hesitation. Footsteps outside, trying to be quiet but crunching on frozen ground. A voice low, "Cave's up here. Saw smoke earlier." Another voice, "Could be just travelers." "Could be them. Boss says check everything." 3 shadows appeared at the cave mouth, dark against starlight. They entered slowly, guns raised. One struck a match, illuminating the empty cave interior, the cold fire pit. "Nobody here," the first man said. "We lost 'em." "Check deeper," said the second. "Could be hiding." They advanced into the cave, spreading out. Elias waited until all 3 were inside, then stepped from behind his cover. "You found us," he said calmly. The men spun, bringing their guns around. Elias fired once the Winchester's report deafening in the confined space. The first man went down, clutching his leg and screaming. Before the other 2 could react, Taya emerged from her position, the Colt barking twice. One man dropped his rifle and fell. The third dove for cover behind a rock, firing wildly. Bullets whined off stone, ricocheting. Elias ducked, returned fire, heard Taya doing the same from her position. "Give it up!" Elias shouted over the gunfire. "You're outflanked!" The response was more bullets. One passed so close to Elias's head he felt the heat of it. He adjusted his aim, fired at the muzzle flash, was rewarded with a grunt of pain. Then silence. Elias waited, straining his ears. He heard labored breathing, the sound of someone moving, then footsteps running, stumbling away from the cave. The third man was fleeing. "Let him go," Elias called to Taya. "Let him tell Daggert what happened here." She emerged from cover smoke curling from the Colt's barrel. Her face was grim but composed. 2 down, 1 escaped. They checked the fallen men. 1 was dead. Taya's shot had caught him in the chest. The other, the one Elias had shot in the leg, was alive but bleeding badly. He stared up at them with pain-glazed eyes. You're dead," he gasped. "Daggert won't stop. He'll hunt you forever." "Let him try," Elias said coldly. He bound the man's wound. He wouldn't leave anyone to bleed out, even an enemy, then tied his hands. "You tell Daggert something for me. Tell him Elias Ward is done running. Tell him if he wants the woman, he'll have to go through me. And tell him I remember everything he did to those Apache prisoners at Fort Sumner. Everything." The man's eyes widened. You'd testify against him." "If I have to," Elias said. "Now crawl back to your boss before you bleed out." He cut the man's bonds and watched him stumble out of the cave, limping badly. The wounded man would slow Daggert down, give them more time, and the threat of testimony would make Daggert cautious. Maybe cautious enough to make a mistake. Taya was gathering their supplies, moving with urgent efficiency. "We cannot stay here." "Agreed. We move now, travel by moonlight. Put as much distance between us and them as possible." Elias loaded the horses quickly. "You did good in that fight, real good." "I told you," Taya said with the ghost of a smile. "Apache women are not weak." They left the cave and the dead man behind, climbing higher into the mountains. The moon was bright enough to see by turning the snow into a ghostly landscape of silver and shadow. They pushed hard, knowing Daggert would be coming with everything he had now. By dawn, they'd crossed the ridge line and started the descent into Dead Man's Pass. Elias's legs felt like rubber. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but they couldn't stop. Not yet. It was mid-morning when Taya suddenly grabbed his arm, pointing. Riders, 5 of them, coming up the pass from the south. For a moment, Elias's heart sank. More of Daggert's men cutting off their escape. Then Taya made a sound between a gasp and a sob. "Blue coats," she said. "Cavalry." Elias saw them now, the distinctive uniforms, the formation. Army patrol, probably out of Fort Stanton. His first instinct was relief. His second was terror. The cavalry didn't distinguish between friendly Apache and hostile Apache. They'd take Taya prisoner at best, shoot her at worst. "We hide," he said urgently. "No." Taya's voice was strange. "The one in front, I know him." "What?" "The sergeant, I know him." She started forward, waving her arms. Harlan Dutch." The patrol saw them, immediately went on alert. Rifles came up, but Taya kept walking forward, hands raised, shouting in a mix of English and Apache. The lead rider held up his hand, stopping his men. He urged his horse forward, alone studying them. As he got closer, Elias recognized him. Sergeant Harlan Dutch, who'd served under his command years ago. A good man, fair-minded, one of the few soldiers who'd questioned the brutality toward prisoners. "Taya," Harlan said, disbelief clear in his voice. "Taya, is that you?" "Yes." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Harlan, I searched for Cohen, my son. Is he alive? Please tell me he alive." Harlan dismounted quickly and approached carefully. He looked between Taya and Elias, confusion and recognition warring on his weathered face. "Ward, Lieutenant Ward? What in God's name is going on?" "It's a long story, Dutch," Elias said wearily. "Short version, I found Taya dying in a creek, brought her back from the edge. She's trying to get to her people, find her son. We've got bounty hunters on our trail led by Cyrus Daggert." Harlan's face darkened at the name. "Daggert, That bastard's still alive. Unfortunately, Elias confirmed. Please, Taya interrupted, grabbing Harlan's arm. My son, Cohen, 4 summers old, you see him? Harlan's expression softened. He'd always had a gentle streak rare among frontier soldiers. I have Taya. I saw him 3 weeks ago at the Mescalero camp in Copper Canyon. Your sister is caring for him. He's alive. He's healthy. Taya collapsed to her knees, sobbing. All the fear, all the pain, all the desperate hope she'd been carrying poured out in those tears. Elias knelt beside her, hand on her shoulder, letting her grieve and rejoice simultaneously. Thank you, she kept saying over and over. Thank you, thank you. Harlan looked at Elias over her bowed head. You've made a lot of trouble for yourself, Lieutenant. There's a warrant out aiding an escaped prisoner theft of property. Daggert filed papers in 3 territories. I don't care about papers, Elias said firmly. She's not property. She's a human being who was tortured and left to die. I'm taking her to her son, and no paper changes that. Harlan studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I didn't see you. What? I said I didn't see you. Harlan turned to his men. Boys, we didn't see anyone up here. Just checking for Apache raiders. No sign of them. We head back to the fort. One of the younger soldiers spoke up. But, Sergeant, they're right there. I said we didn't see anyone private, Harlan repeated, steel in his voice. You got a problem with your eyesight. I'll note it in my report. Might affect your fitness for duty. The soldier fell silent. Harlan turned back to Elias. Copper Canyon is 40 miles south-southwest. Follow the river through Dry Creek Gorge, then cut east at the big lightning-struck pine. You'll know it when you see it. The Mescalero are camped in the North Fork of the canyon. Use my name, tell them Harlan Dutch sent you. They'll let you pass. Why are you helping us? Elias asked. Because I was at Fort Sumner, Harlan said quietly. I saw what Daggert did to those prisoners. I've carried that shame for 8 years. Maybe this balances the scales a little. He mounted his horse. Watch yourself, Ward. Daggert's got connections, resources. He won't quit. Neither will I, Elias said. Harlan smiled grimly. Never thought you would. You were always the stubborn type. He touched his hat to Taya, who had composed herself and was standing again. Good luck, Taya. Give Cohen my best. Tell him Sergeant Dutch says he should grow up strong and brave like his mother. I will, Taya promised. Thank you, Shichu. You are a good man. The patrol rode past them heading north. Elias and Taya watched them go, both. Understanding they'd just received an enormous gift-time information and mercy from an unexpected quarter. You know him well, Taya asked as the soldiers disappeared from view. He served under me for 2 years, saved my life once during an ambush. I saved his during a blizzard patrol. Elias turned to her. He's one of the good ones. There aren't many, but they exist. Like you, Taya said simply. Elias felt heat rise in his face. I'm not... You are, she interrupted. She stepped closer, looking up at him. Elias Ward, you saved my life. You risk everything to help me find my son. You fight beside me. You are good man. Best man I know besides Nashota. The comparison to her late husband should have felt awkward, but instead it felt like an honor. Elias found himself looking at her mouth, at the way the morning sun caught in her dark hair. The space between them felt charged alive with possibility. Taya, he said softly, I need to tell you something. What? These past weeks getting to know you, traveling with you, it's changed me. Woken something up that I thought died with Margaret and Sarah. He swallowed hard. I care about you more than just helping someone in need. I care about you. Taya's eyes widened. For a moment she said nothing, and Elias felt panic rise. He'd said too much, moved too fast, misread everything. Then she reached up and placed her palm against his chest over his heart. I feel it, she said. Your heart. It beats fast. Yeah, Elias admitted. Mine too. She took his hand and pressed it to her own chest. Through the layers of cloth, he could feel her heartbeat rapid, strong. I care for you too, Elias. I did not want to. I tell myself he is white man, enemy, different world, but heart does not listen to reason. They stood like that for a long moment, hands over each other's hearts, the mountains vast and silent around them. When we reach your people, Elias said, when you find Cohen, what happens then? I do not know, Taya admitted. But I want you there, want you to meet him, she hesitated, want you to stay. I want that too, Elias said. More than anything. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deeper. It tasted like hope and grief and new beginnings all mixed together. When they finally separated, both were breathing hard. We should keep moving, Taya said, but she was smiling. Before I forget, we have 40 miles to go. Right, Elias said, feeling lighter than he had in years. 40 miles. They traveled through the day and into the evening, following Harlan's directions. The terrain grew easier as they descended from the high passes into the canyon country. Red rock walls rose around them, ancient and weathered. This was Apache homeland territory they'd fought and died to protect for generations. As the sun set, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson, they made camp in a protected alcove. For the first time since leaving the cabin, Elias felt they were safe enough to risk a real fire and hot food. They sat close together as they ate, shoulders touching. When darkness fell completely, Taya moved into Elias's arms and he held her as she talked about Cohen, his laugh, his curiosity, his fierce independence, even as a toddler. He will like you, she said with certainty. He needs strong man in his life, someone to teach him, guide him. I'm not his father, Elias said carefully. No, but you could be something. Taya turned to look at him. If you stay. I'll stay, Elias promised, as long as you'll have me. They kissed again longer this time, with more urgency. The grief that had kept them both frozen began to thaw in the warmth of contact of connection. They made love there in the firelight, two damaged souls finding solace in each other, finding proof that life could bloom even in barren soil. Afterward, wrapped in blankets beneath impossible stars, Taya fell asleep against his chest. Elias lay awake, feeling her breath against his skin, marveling at the strange path that had led him here. 3 months ago, he'd been ready to die alone in his mountain cabin. Now he held an Apache woman in his arms, planning a future he'd never imagined possible. The world was cruel and violent and full of men like Daggett, who spread hate like disease. But it also held moments like this, moments of tenderness, of love, crossing boundaries that society said should never be crossed. Elias tightened his arms around Taya and closed his eyes, letting himself believe just for tonight that they might actually make it, that they might actually find happiness. He should have known better. The gunshot woke them both, the sound echoing off canyon walls like thunder. Elias was on his feet, instantly, rifle in hand. Taya grabbed the revolver, moving to cover. Dawn was just breaking, painting the sky pale gray. And there at the mouth of the alcove stood 5 riders. Daggett sat his horse in the center, grinning like death itself. "Morning, Ward," he called cheerfully. "Hell of a chase you led us on, but you should know by now I always get what I want." Time seemed to freeze in that gray dawn light. Elias counted the odds in a heartbeat. 5 guns against 2 open ground, with minimal cover trapped in an alcove with only 1 exit. Every tactical instinct screamed they were dead, but he'd be damned if he went down without fighting. "Taya," he said quietly, not taking his eyes off Daggett. "When I start shooting, you run deeper into the canyon. There's a crack in the back wall narrow enough they can't follow on horseback. Get through it and keep going." "I will not leave you," she hissed back. "You have to, for Cohen." He felt her stiffen beside him, felt the war raging inside her mother's duty versus loyalty to the man she'd just given herself to. The mother won. It had to. "I come back for you," she whispered fiercely. "I know," Elias lied. Daggett was still talking, enjoying his moment of triumph. "You know what I admire about you, Ward, your principles. Most men would have turned her in for the reward, but not you. You've got that noble streak that makes you predictable as sunrise." He leaned forward in his saddle. "Also makes you stupid. Takes one to know one." Elias called back, trying to buy seconds. His mind raced through scenarios, discarding each as quickly as it formed. You tracked us through a blizzard over a mountain pass for what, $200 and a woman? It's not about the money anymore, Daggert said, his voice dropping to something darker. It's about respect. You made me look like a fool, Ward. You and your Apache whore embarrassed me in front of my men, killed 2 of them, wounded another. That's a debt that needs paying. Behind Elias, he heard Taya's sharp intake of breath at the slur. He felt her raising the Colt. Easy, he murmured. Not yet. I want her alive. Daggert continued, gesturing to Taya. The Mexicans will pay extra for that. But you, Ward, you. I can deliver dead or alive. Frankly, I'm hoping for dead. Then come take your shot, Elias said coldly. Daggert smiled. Oh, I intend to. Everything happened at once. Daggert's hand moved toward his gun. Elias fired first, the Winchester bucking against his shoulder. The shot caught one of Daggert's men in the chest, spinning him from his saddle. Return fire erupted immediately, bullets whining off the rock walls. Elias grabbed Taya and shoved her toward the back of the alcove. Run! He roared. Now! She ran, and he laid down covering fire, working the Winchester's lever action as fast as his hands could move. Another of Daggert's men went down, clutching his leg. The horses screamed and reared, panicked by the gunfire echoing in the confined space. Elias ducked behind a boulder as bullets chipped stone above his head. He risked a glance back. Taya had reached the crack in the wall and was squeezing through. Good, good. He just had to hold them a little longer. Spread out, Daggert was shouting. 2 of you go around, cut her off Jenkins with me. Elias fired twice more, forcing them to take cover. But his ammunition wouldn't last forever, and they both knew it. He had maybe 15 rounds left. Against 3 men now, with 2 more circling around. A bullet struck inches from his face, showering him with rock fragments. He felt blood running down his cheek, but ignored it. Another shot, another miss, but they were getting closer. They'd learned his rhythm, were timing their advances between his shots. Then he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. Taya screaming, not in fear but in fury. The sound of gunfire from deeper in the canyon. They'd cut her off. Something primal roared to life inside Elias. He stopped calculating, stopped thinking tactically, and just moved. He broke from cover, firing the Winchester one-handed as he ran toward the crack in the wall. A bullet tugged at his coat. Another scored his left shoulder, hot pain blooming. He didn't stop. Behind him, Daggert was shouting, but the words didn't register. Elias reached the crack and squeezed through the stone, scraping his ribs. On the other side, the canyon opened into a wider space with scattered boulders and scrub brush. Taya was there, pinned behind a rock, trading shots with 2 of Daggert's men who had her flanked. Even as Elias emerged, one of them was closing in from her blind side. Elias didn't hesitate. He fired, and the man dropped. Taya spun, saw Elias, and her eyes went wide with relief and terror. The second man turned toward this new threat, bringing his rifle around. Taya shot him twice. The Colt's bark was sharper than the Winchester's roar, but just as deadly. The man staggered, fell. Go! Elias shouted, grabbing her arm. Deeper into the canyon. They ran together now, scrambling over rocks, sliding down slopes, putting distance between them and the alcove. Behind them, Elias could hear Daggert and his remaining man forcing their way through the crack. The canyon twisted and narrowed, walls rising steep on either side. Elias's shoulder was on fire, bleeding steadily. His breath came in ragged gasps. Beside him, Taya was limping. She must have twisted her ankle, though she hadn't complained. There. Taya pointed ahead to where the canyon split into 2 branches. Left fork. I know this place. Played here as child. They took the left fork, and Elias immediately saw what she meant. The passage was barely 3 feet wide, winding between walls of red stone that rose 100 feet overhead. A person could navigate it, but horses couldn't. It would buy them time. They pushed deeper into the narrow passage, sometimes having to turn sideways to fit through. The morning sun hadn't reached down here yet. Everything was shadow and chill. Elias could hear water dripping somewhere, the sound echoing strangely. After 50 yards, the passage opened into a small chamber where a spring fed a pool of crystal-clear water. Petroglyphs covered the walls, ancient Apache symbols, some of them hundreds of years old. Sacred place, Taya whispered. My grandmother brought me here, taught me the old stories. Can we defend it? Elias asked, his tactical mind reasserting itself. Taya studied the chamber. Only one entrance. They must come through passage single file, but also only one exit. Then we make our stand here, Elias said. He checked the Winchester 5 rounds left. How much ammunition do you have? Taya checked the Colt. 3 bullets. 8 shots total against 2 men. The odds had improved, but they were still trapped. Elias moved to the passage entrance, taking position behind a natural stone column that offered cover. Taya took the other side, the Colt steady, in her hands. They waited. Minutes stretched like hours. Water dripped. Stone creaked as it warmed with the climbing sun. And then footsteps. Slow, careful. Someone moving through the narrow passage. Ward. Daggert's voice echoed off the walls, distorted and omnipresent. I know you're in there. Jenkins is coming in one end, I'm coming in the other. You've got nowhere to go. Elias said nothing, conserving his energy, his ammunition, his position. We can end this easy, Daggert continued. Send out the woman, and I'll let you walk. My word on it. Your word's worth less than spit, Elias called back. And even if it wasn't the answer's no, then you'll die for her. Some Apache squaw you knew for what, a few weeks. You're throwing away your life for nothing, Ward. She's not nothing, Elias said quietly, but his voice carried in the chamber. She's everything you're not: brave, strong, decent. Everything you'll never be. Silence. Then, have it your way? Jenkins flushed them out. Movement at the passage entrance. A shadow elongating. Elias aimed, waiting for a clear shot. The shadow resolved into a man, Jenkins, moving cautiously, rifle raised. Elias fired. The bullet caught Jenkins high in the shoulder, spinning him. He fell back into the passage, cursing. Not a killing shot, but it would slow him down. 4 rounds left. More silence. Elias could hear Jenkins groaning, hear the sounds of movement. Daggert would be tending to his man, regrouping. They had time, but not much. Elias, Taya said softly. I am sorry I bring this on you. Stop apologizing, Elias said. I made my choice. I'd make it again. Why? She looked at him, her eyes searching. Why you choose me over your own people? Because you're not my enemy, Elias said simply. Daggert is. Men like him who use war as an excuse for cruelty, they're the enemy. You're just someone trying to survive, trying to find your son. That makes you human. That makes you worth fighting for. Taya's eyes shone with tears. In another world, different time, we could have been happy. We can still be happy, Elias said. We just have to survive the next hour. A sound made them both turn, not from the passage entrance, but from above. Elias looked up and his heart sank. The chamber's walls weren't vertical. They sloped inward, creating a natural chimney, and there, silhouetted against the bright sky, was Daggert. He'd climbed. Drop your weapons, Daggert said, his rifle aimed down at them. From this angle, he had a clear shot at both of them, and they had no cover. Do it now, or I start shooting. Elias met Taya's eyes. In them he saw the same calculation he was making. If they surrendered, Daggert would kill him immediately and take Taya back to the traders. If they fought, they'd both die in the next few seconds. Either way, they lost. I said drop them. Daggert repeated, his voice harder. Slowly, Elias lowered the Winchester to the ground. Taya did the same with the Colt. Smart, Daggert said. Now step away from the weapons. Move toward the pool. They complied, backing toward the spring. Daggert began descending the chamber wall, using the slope, and handholds his rifle slung across his back now. It took him 2 minutes to reach the bottom. 2 minutes where Elias desperately searched for any advantage, any weapon, anything at all. Nothing. Daggert landed lightly, drew his pistol, and covered them both. Jenkins, he called. Get in here. Oh! The wounded man stumbled into the chamber, his shoulder bloody but functional. He picked up the Winchester and Colt, grinning nastily at Elias. Not so tough now, are you? Jenkins spat. Daggert moved closer, his gun never wavering. He looked Elias up and down, shaking his head. You were always too soft, Ward, Too much heart, not enough killer instinct. That's why you never made captain. That's why you'll die here while I ride away rich. Money won't wash the blood off your hands, Elias said. Who says I want to wash it off? Daggert laughed. I like what I am. I'm honest about it. You're the one who's confused playing at being righteous while the world burns around you. He turned to Taya, looking her over like livestock. I can see why he was tempted. You clean up pretty well for a savage. The Mexicans will get good use out of you before they sell you south. Taya spit in his face. Daggert's expression went flat. He wiped the spittle away slowly, then backhanded her across the face. Taya's head snapped to the side, blood springing from her split lip. Elias lunged forward, rage obliterating thought. Daggert's pistol cracked and fire exploded in Elias's left shoulder, the same shoulder that had been grazed earlier. The impact drove him to his knees. Stay down, Daggert said coldly, or the next one goes through your skull. Elias stayed down, breathing hard, blood soaking his shirt. Taya was on her knees, too, touching her swelling cheek, her eyes burning with hatred. Here's what's going to happen, Daggert said conversationally. Jenkins is going to tie up the woman. Then I'm going to kill you, Ward. Slow if I'm feeling creative. Then we take the woman back to the trading post, collect our money, and forget this ever happened. Cohen, Taya said suddenly, her voice cracking. My son, please. Let me see my son first. Your son? Daggert looked surprised, then laughed. You had a kid. Where is he, dead in some ditch? He is alive, Taya said fiercely. With my people. Please, just let me see him one time. Then you can take me. I will not fight. Daggert considered this, clearly enjoying her desperation. You know what? No. Because watching you beg is more entertaining than watching you reunite with some brat. Taya closed her eyes, and Elias saw something break inside her. Not her spirit, but her hope. She'd been fighting so hard, come so far, and now she would never see Cohen again. He couldn't let that happen. Elias's hand moved slowly, carefully toward his boot. He kept a knife there, a small blade backup for emergencies. Daggert was focused on Taya, savoring her anguish. Jenkins was binding her hands behind her back. Elias's fingers closed around the knife handle. Any last words, Ward? Daggert asked, turning back to him. Something profound. A message for... Elias threw the knife. His father had taught him knife throwing as a boy, and he'd practiced for years. Even wounded, exhausted, kneeling in the dirt, his aim was true. The blade buried itself in Daggert's throat. Daggert's eyes went wide with shock. He dropped his pistol, both hands going to the knife. Blood poured between his fingers. He tried to speak, but only a wet gurgle emerged. Jenkins shouted, bringing the Winchester up. Taya, her hands still partially bound, threw herself at him. They went down together, grappling. The rifle went off the shot, ricocheting harmlessly off stone. Elias dove for Daggert's dropped pistol, his wounded shoulder screaming protest. His fingers closed around it just as Daggert collapsed, still clawing at the knife, his life pumping out onto the sacred stone. Jenkins and Taya were still struggling. She was fierce, all claws and teeth, but he was stronger. He got on top of her, hands around her throat. Elias aimed and fired. The bullet took Jenkins in the side of the head. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Silence crashed over the chamber. Elias and Taya stared at each other across the bodies, both breathing hard, both covered in blood, some their own, some their enemies. You are alive, Taya said, her voice breaking. So are you, Elias replied. They crawled to each other, meeting in the middle. Their embrace was desperate, grateful, both of them shaking with adrenaline and relief. I thought I lost you, Taya whispered against his chest. Never, Elias said. I promised I'd get you to Cohen. I keep my promises. They stayed like that for a long moment, taking comfort in each other's solidity, in the simple fact of survival. Then slowly they pulled apart and assessed the damage. Elias's shoulder was bad, the bullet had gone clean through, but he was losing blood steadily. Taya tore strips from her shirt and bound it tightly, her hands steady despite everything. You need doctor, she said. I need to get you to your son, Elias corrected. Everything else can wait. She looked at him, started to argue, then just nodded. They both knew he was right. They'd come too far to stop now. They gathered weapons and what supplies they could salvage from Daggert's men. Elias took Daggert's buffalo coat. It was cold-blooded but practical. The man wouldn't need it anymore. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Taya paused, looking at the petroglyphs on the walls. My grandmother said this place is guarded by spirits. Anyone who brings violence here will be judged. She looked at the bodies. Daggert's eyes were open, staring at nothing. Jenkins lay in a spreading pool of blood. I think they were judged, Elias said quietly. Yes, Taya agreed. And we were found worthy. They left the sacred chamber and made their way back through the narrow passage. The sun was high now, warming the canyon. In the distance, they could hear water running the river Harlan had mentioned, the one that would lead them to Copper Canyon, to Cohen. They walked for hours, Elias fighting dizziness from blood loss. Taya supporting him when he stumbled. She'd gone from prisoner to partner to the only thing keeping him upright. The irony wasn't lost on him. The woman everyone said was property, was savage, was less than human, was literally holding him up, keeping him alive. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they finally saw it, the lightning-struck pine exactly as Harlan had described. A massive ponderosa split down the middle by some ancient storm, its two halves spreading apart like arms reaching for the sky. There, Taya breathed. We are close. They turned east following a game trail. The canyon walls rose higher here, striated in reds and oranges and golds, beautiful and ancient and utterly indifferent to human suffering. Then Taya stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ahead, smoke rose from cooking fires. Not one fire many. A camp. Hidden in a box canyon protected on three sides by sheer walls was a small Apache settlement. Her people. Cohen, Taya whispered. Then louder, Cohen! She started running, all exhaustion forgotten. Elias followed as fast as his wounded body would allow, watching as figures emerged from wickiups, women, children, elders. They saw Taya, and voices rose in surprise and joy. Then Elias heard it, a child's voice, high and excited. Ima, Ima. A small boy burst from one of the wickiups and ran toward Taya. He was maybe 4 years old, all flying dark hair and skinny limbs. Taya fell to her knees and caught him, and the sound she made, part sob, part laugh, pure joy, was the most beautiful thing Elias had ever heard. She held him like she'd never let go, rocking him, covering his face with kisses, speaking rapid Apache through her tears. The boy was crying too, clinging to her, both of them lost in reunion. Elias stopped at the edge of the camp, not wanting to intrude. This was their moment. He'd done what he'd promised, delivered her to her son. That was enough. An older woman approached him, Apache, maybe 60, with silver streaks in her long hair and eyes that had seen too much. She looked him up and down, taking in his bloody shirt, his cavalry-style clothing, the weapons he carried. You are the one, she said in accented English. The one who saved Taya. Yes, ma'am, Elias said, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Harlan Dutch sent word by runner 3 days ago. Said a white man and Taya were coming. Said we should not shoot you. She smiled slightly. Lucky for you he sent that message. Yes, ma'am, Elias agreed. The woman studied him for a long moment. You love her. It wasn't a question, but Elias answered anyway. Yes. And she loves you. I hope so. The woman nodded as if confirming something she'd already suspected. I am Isa Taya's aunt. You are welcome here. We will care for your wounds, give you food and shelter. You have done great thing bringing her home. Thank you, Elias said, and found he could barely get the words out. The adrenaline that had kept him moving was finally fading, leaving only pain and weariness. Isa called out in Apache, and 2 young men came forward. They supported Elias, helping him toward one of the wickiups. As they passed Taya, she looked up from her son, her face radiant with joy. Eli Az, she said. This is Cohen. Cohen, this is the man I told you about. The brave warrior who helped Ima come home. The little boy peeked at him shyly, then hid his face in Taya's shoulder. Elias smiled despite his pain. He's beautiful, Elias said. Just like his mother. Rest now, Taya said gently. We talk later. I must. She looked at her son, overwhelmed. I must hold him a while longer. Take all the time you need, Elias said. They led him to a wickiup where an old woman with healer's tools was waiting. She clucked her tongue at his shoulder wound and set to work with practiced efficiency. The pain was excruciating as she cleaned and stitched, but Elias barely noticed. He was watching through the open entrance as Taya sat with her son, other women gathering around them, children playing nearby. He'd done it, against all odds against Daggert and the mountains and his own ghosts. He'd done it. As darkness fell and the healer finally finished her work, Elias lay back on the soft bedding and let himself drift. Somewhere outside he could hear Taya laughing, really laughing, the sound bright and unguarded. He fell asleep to that sound, a smile on his face despite everything. Elias woke to birdsong and the smell of wood smoke. For a moment disoriented, he thought he was back in his mountain cabin. Then the pain in his shoulder reminded him otherwise, and the events of the previous days came flooding back. He was in the Mescalero camp. Taya had found her son. They'd survived. Sunlight filtered through the Wikiup's entrance painting everything in warm gold. Elias sat up slowly, testing his body. The shoulder throbbed, but the pain was manageable. The old healer had done good work. The wound was clean, properly stitched, wrapped in cloth that smelled of herbs. A shadow appeared in the entrance. Cohen, the little boy, peered in at him with wide, dark eyes. When he saw Elias was awake, he didn't run. Instead, he stepped inside, small and cautious. "Hello?" Elias said softly, not wanting to scare him. Cohen said something in Apache, a question judging by his tone. Elias shook his head apologetically. "I don't understand. I'm sorry." The boy tried again, this time in halting English. "You hurt Ima." Elias's heart broke a little. Of course the child would be wary. He'd lost his mother, been passed between strangers, seen violence. Trust wouldn't come easy. "No," Elias said firmly. "I would never hurt your Ima. I helped her, kept her safe so she could come back to you." Cohen studied him with an intensity that reminded Elias achingly of Taya. Then, apparently satisfied, he came closer and sat down cross-legged just out of arm's reach. "Emma says you are a good man," Cohen announced. "She says you have sad eyes but brave heart." "Your Emma is very wise," Elias said, smiling. "Why your eyes sad?" Cohen asked with the blunt curiosity of children. Elias considered how to answer. "I had a little girl once. She was not much older than you. She died, and it made my eyes sad." "Oh," Cohen processed this. "My Ada died too. He fight cavalry. Maybe you know him." The question was so innocent, so guileless, that it cut deeper than any knife. Elias swallowed hard. "I don't think so. There were many battles. Many good men died on both sides." "Emma says war is stupid," Cohen said matter-of-factly. "She says men fight over land that belongs to Creator, not to people." "Your Emma is very wise," Elias repeated, meaning it even more this time. Cohen inched closer. "You stay here with us." I don't know. That's up to your Emma and your people." "I want you to stay," Cohen said with the simple certainty of childhood. "Emma is happy now. She smiles like before the bad men took her." Before Elias could respond, Taya appeared in the entrance. She was wearing traditional Apache clothing now, a deerskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork, her hair braided and adorned with silver. She looked radiant, like she'd shed 3 years of sorrow overnight. "Cohen," she said gently, "let Elias rest. Come help me gather wood." "But, Ima—" "Come," she repeated, but her eyes were warm. Cohen sighed dramatically and stood, giving Elias a small wave before scampering out. Taya watched him go with a mother's adoring exasperation, then turned back to Elias. "He likes you," she said. "He told me this morning you have strong face like warrior, but soft heart like grandfather." "High praise," Elias said, shifting to make room. Taya entered and sat beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. "How do you feel?" she asked, her fingers hovering near his bandaged shoulder. "Like I got shot, fell down a mountain, and fought for my life," Elias said. "So better than yesterday." She smiled, but it faded quickly. "Eli, as we must talk about what happens now." His stomach tightened. He'd known this conversation was coming, had been dreading it. All right. Taya took a breath, choosing her words carefully. The elders they meet last night discuss you being here. Some are angry, you are white man, former cavalry. Some say you cannot stay. I understand, Elias said, though each word felt like glass in his throat. I'll leave today. I don't want to cause trouble for you or your people. I did not finish, Taya said, placing her hand over his. Some say you cannot stay, but more say you must stay. They say any man who risks his life for Apache woman, who kills men to protect her, who brings her home to her son, this man has honor. This man deserves place among us. Hope flickered in Elias's chest, fragile as a candle flame. What are you saying? I am saying you can stay, if you want to. Her eyes searched his face. The elder Nantache, he says you must learn our ways, learn our language, respect our customs, and you must accept that some will never trust you, never accept you. It will be hard. I've done hard, Elias said. Hard doesn't scare me. And us, Taya asked softly. What we started in the canyon. That will be harder still. My people will talk. Say I dishonor Nashota's memory. Say I betray our ways by choosing white man. Then maybe I shouldn't. Stop, Taya interrupted. I choose you, Eli, as ward. I choose you because you see me as human, not as savage or property. Because you stand with me when everyone else runs away. Because when I look at you, I see man I want to share my life with. Her voice wavered. If you want that too. Elias cupped her face with his good hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. I want that more than anything. But I need to know it's what you want, not what you think you owe me. I owe you my life, Taya said, but I offer you my heart. Those are different things. They kissed then soft and sweet, a promise made in morning light. When they parted, both were smiling. So I stay, Elias said. You stay, Taya confirmed. Over the following weeks, Elias began the difficult process of integration. The Mescalero Apache had been pushed to the margins of their ancestral lands, forced into hiding by decades of broken treaties and military campaigns. Trust did not come easy. Some of the warriors watched him with barely concealed hostility. Some of the women turned away when he passed. The children were more accepting, especially after Cohen appointed himself Elias's shadow, an unofficial interpreter. Nantaje, the tribal elder who'd spoken in his favor, took on the task of educating him. The old man was patient but demanding drilling Elias in Apache language and customs with the stern authority of a man who'd survived 80 winters. Words are easy, Nantaje said one afternoon as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree. You will learn our words. Understanding is harder. Understanding takes time. I have time, Elias said, practicing the careful pronunciation of Apache phrases. Do you? Nantaje's eyes were shrewd. Army still hunts us. Settlers push closer every year. Time is what we do not have. It was true. Even here in their hidden canyon, the Mescalero lived with constant vigilance. Scouts watched the approaches. Fires were kept small. They were survivors clinging to a way of life that the world seemed determined to erase. Elias made himself useful where he could. His knowledge of cavalry tactics helped them plan better defensive positions. His hunting skills, rusty but serviceable, brought in game. Slowly, grudgingly, he began earning a place in the community. Taya watched his integration with quiet pride, helping where she could but letting him stand on his own. She had her own readjustment to make, reconnecting with her sister, rebuilding relationships strained by her long absence, learning to be a mother again to a son who'd grown and changed without her. One evening, about a month after their arrival, Elias found her sitting alone on a rock outcropping overlooking the canyon. The sunset painted the walls in impossible reds and purples. He climbed up and sat beside her. Cohen asleep? He asked. Yes. Finally. She leaned against him. He asked today if you would teach him to shoot. I said I must ask you first. I'd be honored, Elias said, if you think he's ready. Apache boys learn young, and she paused. He sees you as father figure. I worry this is too fast for him, for us. Do you want me to step back? Elias asked. Give him space. No. Taya turned to look at him. I want opposite. I want you closer. I want us to be family, but I fear it. Why? Because happiness scares me now, she admitted. For so long I just survive. I forget how to live, how to hope. And now I have you, have Cohen, have home. It feels too good. Like it must be taken away. Elias understood that fear intimately. It was the same one that had driven him into the mountains after Margaret and Sarah died, the terror of caring again, of being vulnerable to loss. My father used to say that joy and sorrow are twins, Elias said quietly. You can't have one without risking the other. The question is whether the joy is worth the risk. Is it, Taya asked, worth it to you? Elias thought of his daughter's laugh, his wife's smile, the brief years of happiness before cholera stole them. The grief had been crushing, nearly destroyed him, but would he trade those years to avoid the pain? Yes, he said finally. 1,000 times yes. Because they were mine. That time that love, no one can take that away. Not death, not loss, not anything. Taya was quiet for a long moment. Then, I want to marry you. Apache way. Elias's heart stumbled. Are you sure? Very sure. She took his hand. I talk to elders. They say after proper time passes, after you learn more of our ways, we can have ceremony. Nantaje agrees to perform it. Taya, Elias found his throat tight. I would be honored, more than honored. There is one thing, she said. Apache marriages, they are different from white marriages. Woman can divorce man if he treats her badly. Children belong to mother's clan. If you marry me, you must accept these things. I accept, Elias said immediately. I'm not looking to own you, Taya. I'm looking to share my life with you. However that works in your culture, I'll adapt. She kissed him, then hard and deep as the last light faded from the canyon. When they finally returned to camp, hand in hand, several people noticed. Elias saw the knowing smiles, the approving nods. And he saw, too, the few who still frowned, still disapproved. He could live with that. The seasons turned. Summer came to the canyon, bringing heat and the hard work of survival. Elias helped build new wiki-ups, tended crops, stood watch. His Apache improved daily, though he still stumbled over the more complex phrases. Cohen became his constant companion, the boy's initial shyness replaced by chattering enthusiasm. When I grow up, I will be warrior like you and Ada, Cohen announced one day, as Elias taught him to track deer. Your Ada was a brave man, Elias said carefully. But being a warrior isn't the only way to serve your people. You could be a healer or a leader or a teacher. What will you be? Cohen asked. I don't know yet, Elias admitted. I'm still figuring that out. You will be my second AD, Cohen said with childlike certainty. Ima says so. She says you and her will marry at harvest time. The wedding happened on an evening in late September when the cottonwoods had turned gold and the air carried the first hints of autumn chill. Elias wore clothing that Taya's sister had made for him, deerskin pants and shirt decorated with Apache patterns, a medicine bag around his neck that Nantaje had blessed. The ceremony was simple but profound. Nantaje spoke words in Apache about the joining of two paths, the blending of two lives. Taya and Elias exchanged gifts. He gave her his mother's ring, the only thing of value he still owned from his old life, and she gave him a knife she'd made herself, the handle carved with symbols of protection and love. They shared food from a single bowl, signifying they would sustain each other. They wrapped themselves in a blanket together, signifying they would shelter each other. And when Nantaje pronounced them married, the entire camp raised voices in celebration. Cohen was ecstatic, running circles around them and proclaiming loudly to anyone who would listen that he now had two Adas, one in the spirit world and one beside him. No one corrected him. That night in their own wiki-up, Elias and Taya lay together as husband and wife. The connection between them had deepened over months of shared danger, shared grief, shared hope. Now it felt complete, blessed by her people and the spirits of the canyon. I love you, Elias whispered in the darkness. I love you, hon, Taya whispered back. Then in Apache she added words he'd learned to recognize. My heart walks beside your heart." For the first time in 3 years, Elias felt at peace. The ghosts of his past, Margaret Sarah, the violence of his cavalry years would always be with him, but they no longer ruled him. He'd found a way forward, a new family, a new purpose. The peace lasted 3 months. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow that even the old ones said was unusual for this time and place. The camp prepared carefully, stockpiling food and firewood, reinforcing shelters. Elias used his knowledge of mountain winters to help them prepare for the worst. It was a cold December morning when the scouts returned with grim news. Cavalry patrol 2 days' ride north. 30 soldiers moving south. They might be passing through, or they might be hunting. The camp went on high alert. Warriors checked weapons. Women and children prepared to evacuate deeper into the canyon if necessary. Everyone had a role, a plan. This was a life they knew too well. Elias stood with the other men, Winchester in hand, watching the northern approaches. Beside him, Taya held her own rifle, her face set in hard lines. Cohen was with the other children in a protected area deeper in the canyon, guarded by the elders. "If fighting comes," Taya said quietly, "you must promise me something." "Anything," Elias said. "Promise you will take Cohen and run. Get him to safety. Do not stay and die for pride." "I'm not running," Elias said. "This is my home now. These are my people. I fight with you." Elias, "No." He looked at her. "I didn't come all this way survive, all that we survived to run when your people need me. We stand together. That's what family means." Taya's eyes shone, but she nodded. They turned back to watching the approaches. Hours passed. The sun climbed, then began its descent. The tension in the camp was palpable, everyone waiting for the sound of hoofbeats that would signal attack. Then one of the scouts returned riding hard. He spoke rapidly in Apache to Nantahe. Elias caught enough to understand the cavalry patrol had changed direction. They were heading east away from the canyon. A collective exhale rippled through the camp. Not today. Today they were safe. But everyone knew it was temporary. The pressure was increasing. More settlers every year, more soldiers, more treaties broken, more land stolen. The question wasn't if they'd have to fight, but when. That night, Elias and Taya lay with Cohen between them. The boy had been frightened by the day's tension and wanted both his parents close. He fell asleep holding both their hands. "I worry for his future," Taya whispered over his head. "What world will he grow up in?" "I don't know," Elias admitted. "But whatever comes, he'll have us. Both of us. We'll teach him to be strong, to be wise, to survive. And to love," Taya added. "Even when the world says he should hate. You teach me this, Elias. You show me that love can cross any boundary, heal any wound." "You taught me the same thing," Elias said. "When I found you in that creek, I was more dead than alive. You brought me back." They fell silent, listening to their son's gentle breathing, feeling the warmth of family, of home, of belonging. Spring came again, and with it changes. Harlan Dutch visited the camp, bringing news from the outside world. The wars were winding down, he said. Geronimo had surrendered. Most Apache had been forced onto reservations. The Mescalero were some of the last holdouts. "The Army's offering terms," Harlan said, sitting with Nantahe and the other elders. Elias translated when needed. "If you come in peacefully, they'll grant you land supplies. It's not much, but it's a chance at survival." "Reservation is slow death," one of the warriors said bitterly. "We have seen it. They take our weapons, our freedom, our dignity." "Staying here is fast death," Harlan countered gently. "I'm sorry to be blunt, but it's true. They know where you are now. More troops are coming. If you fight, they'll crush you." The debate raged for hours. Elias listened, his heart heavy. This was their decision to make, not his. But he understood the impossible choice they faced: surrender and lose everything slowly, or fight and lose everything quickly. In the end, it was Nantahe who spoke the words that settled it. "We are not warriors anymore. We are survivors. Our duty is to survive so our children have a future. Even a small future is better than none." The vote, when it came, was close, but they agreed. They would go to the reservation. The journey took 2 weeks. Soldiers escorted them for protection, Harlan said, though everyone knew it was also to ensure they actually went. Elias rode beside Taya and Cohen, watching his adopted people leave their canyon home carrying what little they could. Taya wept silently as they crossed the last ridge. Elias reached over and took her hand. "I'm sorry," he said. "You did not do this," she replied. "You stand with us. That is all you can do." The reservation was as grim as everyone feared, crowded, poorly supplied, governed by rules that made no sense in Apache culture. But they made it work because they had no choice. They built new homes, planted new crops, learned to navigate the bureaucracy of Indian agents and government rations. Elias used his connections and his English to advocate for better treatment, better supplies. His white face and cavalry past gave him access that the Apache didn't have. Some of the Indian agents were corrupt, skimming supplies, but others were decent men trying to do right. Elias learned to work with both, pushing, negotiating, sometimes threatening when necessary. "You are good at this," Taya observed one evening after he'd secured a shipment of winter coats that had mysteriously gone missing. "Fighting with words instead of bullets." "I'm learning from the best," Elias said, nodding at Ntahe, who had proven to be a shrewd diplomat in his own right. Cohen was growing, shooting up tall and lean. He was 7 now, already skilled with bow and rifle, fluent in both Apache and English. He moved between worlds with an ease that gave Elias hope. Maybe this generation would find a way forward that didn't involve endless fighting. One summer evening, 5 years after they'd come to the reservation, Elias and Taya climbed a hill overlooking their small settlement. Their second child, a daughter they'd named Sarah after Elias's lost girl, was asleep on Taya's back in a cradle board. "You are happy?" Taya asked. Elias considered the question honestly. Was he happy? Life on the reservation was hard, often frustrating, sometimes heartbreaking. They had to watch their culture slowly eroded, their freedom circumscribed. Many of their people struggled with despair, with alcohol, with the crushing weight of displacement. But he had Taya. He had Cohen and Sarah. He had purpose, helping his adopted people navigate this new reality. He had love, fierce and tested and true. "Yes," he said finally, "not the happiness I expected, not the life I planned, but yes, I'm happy." "Good," Taya said, leaning against him, "because I am happy too. Even here, even with all the hardship, I have you. I have our children. I have hope." They watched the sun set over the reservation, painting the sky in the same reds and golds that had colored the canyon they'd left behind. That canyon was gone, that life was gone. But they were still here, still standing, still loving. Years later, when Elias was an old man with silver in his hair and grandchildren at his feet, people would ask him about the old days, about the violence, the cavalry, the wars. And he would tell them the truth. Yes, those days were real. Yes, terrible things happened. But he would also tell them about the woman he found in the creek, nearly frozen to death, about the journey through the mountains, about the love that grew in the spaces between grief and hope. He would tell them that the world tried to make them enemies, but they chose to be family instead. And that choice, that simple, profound choice to see each other as human, made all the difference. Because in the end, that was what survived. Not the wars, not the hatred, not the old boundaries and old hatreds. What survived was love. Stubborn, impossible, transcendent love. Elias and Taya's story became part of the oral tradition passed down through generations. The tale of the hunter who found a captive and chose mercy. The tale of two people from opposite sides who built a bridge across the divide. And on warm summer evenings, when the grandchildren would beg for stories, Taya would smile her private smile and begin, "Let me tell you about the day your grandfather saved my life. Let me tell you about the day we both learned that kindness can still make room for hope." The mountains listened, eternal and silent witnesses to a truth the frontier rarely allowed but could never quite destroy that. Even in a land built on violence, love could take root and grow. That against history, against hatred, against all reason, two people could choose each other and build something beautiful from the ruins. And in choosing each other, they chose hope. Not just for themselves, but for everyone who came after. A living testament that the human heart, when brave enough to remain open, could bridge any divide. That was their legacy. That was their gift. That was love carved out of mercy and blood, blooming eternal, in the shadow of mountains that had seen everything and forgiven nothing except perhaps two souls who dared to believe in tomorrow.